have double hip dysplasia and you were likely born with that. I couldn't pick up my leg to put a sock on. I have a nephew, and at that time he was 2. I couldn't even pick him up at the time. So I said, I want to run with him and I want to be able to go on the trampoline. And you said, we'll make it happen.
If you have hip pain and you've been told that you have hip dysplasia and that your hip sockets are too shallow, then you're going to want to pay attention to today's video. I'm talking today with a former client of mine, Erica, who tried to fix her hip pain without surgery, and you're going to learn what she's learned on that journey. Her hip pain was so bad she couldn't even walk without a cane in her late 20s, and now she's able to sit down with me and share all the wisdom she learned from using exercise instead of surgery to fix her hip pain. So if you're ready, let's get ready to think right, move right, and feel right. Thanks for taking the time to talk about your story with hip pain and hip dysplasia. I think the best place to start is from the beginning. So can you kind of give us the background? What happened to your hips? What were you feeling? How old were you? And then what did doctors tell you?
Yeah. So it started in 2020. And I was working out from home a lot because we were home from the pandemic. I felt something in my right hip and I thought, like, oh, I just hurt myself during a workout. Didn't think it was a big deal. And probably about 2 weeks in, when it wasn't going away, I was like, okay, this might be something. Like, I should probably get this checked out. So I actually went to a chiropractor. I just thought, let me start there. Maybe I need to be adjusted, aligned. And it didn't help. It got worse. It's hard to explain because it was just a constant discomfort. Not like a triggering pain, but it turned into the point where I couldn't pick up my leg to put a sock on, because it's just like I couldn't lift from my hip joint. At the time, my brother-in-law was working in medical sales, so he was able to get me an appointment with the top orthopedic surgeon in the West Coast.
Okay.
And I thought that was so dramatic. I was like, I don't need that. Like, I'm fine. I probably need to stretch. And I went to him. The first thing they did was x-rays. Mm-hmm. And he said, okay, you have double hip dysplasia and you were likely born with that. And I don't know if a lot of people know what that is. I don't know if you want to even explain what that is because of...
Sure.
Yeah.
So hip dysplasia, the short version is you have supposedly very shallow hip sockets. Mm-hmm. So that supposedly your femur is just very loose and unstable within that socket.
Yeah. So and I was like, oh, maybe that's why I'm more flexible, or that's what he told me. He's like, you're more flexible, but it's not necessarily a good thing. So I even saw on my x-rays, like, he kind of showed me how it like stuck out a bit. And it was just, then I had an MRI, and it was on the MRI, he said that on my right side, I had a labral tear in my hip. But he said it was so small that most people wouldn't even catch it. Okay. But that's where my pain was coming from.
The labral tear?
Yes, okay. Labral tear. But that I was more prone to tears because of the hip dysplasia.
Okay.
And so in that appointment, I said, okay, well, what's next? And he said, there's not a lot we can do for you because of the hip dysplasia. Like, even if we were to go and fix the tear, it'll likely happen again because of the way your bones are structured. So we can give you some PRP injections. And if that doesn't work down the line, we'll have to do surgery on your hips. And it's called PAO. PAO. I didn't need the surgery. So, and so then I said, okay, well, like, what now? And he said, stay away from anything high impact. And that includes walking uphill, no squats, no jumping jacks. And I was doing a lot of dance cardio at the time. And he said, no dance cardio. And I said, okay, all right. For how long? Like, how long should I stay away from that? Mm-hmm. And he said, forever. And I left that appointment, and I think it took a minute to set in, and 30 minutes later on the drive home, I was crying. Because I was like, how? Like, how could this even be? I was 27. Right. And so I made the appointments for the PRP injections.
I just want to pause for 1 second to highlight how ridiculous this is. Take away anything you enjoy in your life because your hip hurts now, even though it wasn't hurting before, even though the bone shapes have not changed overnight. For some reason now, you should consider yourself crippled and permanently damaged for the rest of your life, and you are no longer going to enjoy anything. Think about how crushing that is to the soul, how crushing that is to a human being.
I think I did that about 2 weeks later. It did not do anything. It didn't help at all. Okay. And so very quickly, I got much, much worse, to the point where I was walking with a cane because I literally couldn't even hardly lift my leg.
Okay.
And so it was Thanksgiving break, so November of 2020, and I had the week off of work, and I was laying in bed because I couldn't do much, and so I started to look up that surgery.
So PAO is periacetabular osteotomy, and I'll just let you kind of describe what you found about it.
Yes, and I mean, I can't even, like, you can describe it better scientifically or exactly what, but essentially the way I saw it when I looked it up is they're deconstructing your hip, and they take your bone out of your socket and to realign it and put it in the right way, and they could only do one hip at a time. And I actually watched the surgery, an animated version of it.
Let's make sure you understand just how insane periacetabular osteotomy is to supposedly fix hip dysplasia. You end up, of course, being knocked out, and then they saw through basically the entire section of your pelvis here so that they can reorient it. Once they have this whole chunk of your bone cut, they separate and then reorient this part down, and then they use giant screws from the big elephant ears, the ilium, down into that section so that there's a giant gap where your hip used to be one contiguous piece of bone. They literally chunk it, break the whole freaking thing, and reorient everything, supposedly to give you more stability. Unfortunately, the actual results of dysplasia surgeries, these PAOs, is not that good. And I'm going to link to an article and some research so you can read about it yourself. It's going to be in the description box.
And you have to relearn to walk. You have to do physical therapy. I mean, I'm pretty sure for doing both hips, it was like about a year time of like surgery and healing until you could be back to normal. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, there's just no way. Like, there's no way at this point I would be willing to do something like this. And keep in mind, I was in bed, couldn't walk, was probably in the lowest state, physically and mentally, that I've ever been in. And I just thought there has to be another way. There has to be something. I'm willing to try anything. And I don't know what I Googled. I have no idea. I was doing a million different Google searches, and I came across a video. It was a testimonial of a young lady who saw you. Mm-hmm. And she had a similar experience just with her hips and not being able to walk. And I remember she had said something that before she worked with you, I think her goal was to be able to deadlift or something along those lines. Okay. And that she said after doing your program and working with you, within 2 months, she was shocked that she was deadlifting. And prior to that, she could hardly walk. And I just thought, it just clicked. I was like, I don't know who this guy is, but like, I'm reaching out to him, and I have to just talk to him. And so I went to your website and I sent an inquiry, and then that is how I found you.
And so we ended up working together for a few months. Earlier off camera, we were trying to remember how long, because it's been many years.
Because I wouldn't let you go. Yeah, I wanted to keep working together.
Yeah, so if we rewind to that period, so you were starting from your lowest point ever. Mm-hmm. You couldn't lift that leg, right?
Not at all.
And then I asked you, basically, what's your goal here? Like, what are you trying to do? Yes. And then what was your goal at that time?
My goal at that time is, I said, I want, I have a nephew, and at that time he was, I think, 2. And I said, I just want to be able to run with him and jump on the trampoline with him, because that's something I would always do. And I couldn't even pick him up at the time. So I said, I want to run with him, and I want to be able to go on the trampoline. And you said, we'll make it happen.
And so what happened then?
Yeah.
What was the process like?
Yeah, so the process was, so where we started, oh gosh, I couldn't do much. Like, I could hardly even get into like a sit down in a V, right? So you evaluated me. You were like, the MRI doesn't matter. It's all how you feel, and we're going to strengthen all the muscles around where your groin is, and we're going to tackle your whole body. And you gave me a program. I believe we were meeting once a week on Zoom. And I'm pretty sure I was recording my exercises for you too, so you could monitor my form.
Yeah, you would send me, especially if you had questions,
yeah.
You would send me something. Yeah.
Yes. So, and I was working from home on my lunch breaks, as I used to sit here in this room and do my exercises. I also tried to be really diligent about getting up and stretching more rather than, because I sat a lot at a chair for a long time, so didn't want to stay stiff there. And then I think, honestly, so quickly I progressed. Even just within like a few weeks, we were adding on more to the program.
Right.
And I would say within a couple months, it was like, oh, I could walk. I could pick up my leg and put a sock on.
Right. So I am not doing sessions one-on-one with anybody anymore, so I just want to make that clear from the start. I do want you, however, to understand some of the exercises that were helpful for Erica, because they might be helpful for you. Also keep in mind that if you try some of these exercises and they don't feel like they're correct, not the right ones for you, then they're probably not right for you right now, and we'll talk about that more as we go through it. So first of all, Erica's issues were right here. She felt pain right where the quadriceps muscle attaches up to the front of the pelvis. And again, doctors were saying, oh, that's because of the labral tear, which P.S. labrum is not anywhere near there. And they're saying, oh, because of dysplasia, blah, blah, blah. But again, her bone shapes didn't change overnight, so why wasn't she in pain before? It's because the muscles actually were the problem. So what we had to do was first identify where she was weak, build up strength, and then see if we can start building function back to the area that was painful. You don't have to go right at the area that hurts first, and oftentimes that's not productive. So for her, we started looking, where are you weak? Do you have butt muscles, hamstring muscles? Do you have inner thigh muscles, outer hip muscles? Are they there and functioning? If not, let's build them, and let's also try to build strength back where you feel that pain. So that can be really simple. You don't have to overthink it. I've got a video that covers a whole bunch of different exercises you can do to strengthen your hips. I will share that in the description box. You just need to start exploring and then choose the ones that work well for you. So simple things you can do include working on your glute strength with bridges, or single leg bridges like this, or single leg descent. So you're just working on that eccentric as you build strength there. Then you can start going into that kind of full single leg bridge where you're controlling it up and down. I'm slowing down because I know if you see me do it fast, you're going to do it fast. The idea here is to take your time and make sure you control the full range of motion, and make sure that you are checking both sides and keeping both sides in good balanced strength shape, okay? So glutes, for example. Then you can also do things where you are lifting up using your outer hip muscles to control the leg. Again, I'm doing this kind of fast, but slow it down, right? You can do this with a bent knee. You can do these in different positions, different angles to help build that up. You can also be working on the inner thigh muscles, right? These are all simple exercises you can start doing, and you can progress them by adding ankle weights. You can progress them by adding bands, resistance, just even a simple weight on top of your foot or a heavy shoe. Those are simple ways to build the inner thighs, butt muscles, outer hips. And then when you want to build strength in the front of your hip, you can do simple things like lifting up, just like that. And again, you can progress that by adding weight. You can change the angle by closing yourself in more and use the muscles that are actually weak. Work yourself to a reasonable amount of fatigue. You shouldn't be grunting and groaning and crying. You should just feel the challenge in the right muscles and then call it a day. Do a couple sets and then call it a day. You don't need to make it so hard that you're sweating and dying. That's probably going to hurt you, and you're going to regret doing things that intensely. Also remember that sometimes when you do an exercise, it's not going to be the right one. You might find that, hey, this area, like just trying to lift using those muscles, it's too much this week. Maybe next week also is just too much and it causes too much pain and discomfort. Okay, work on the other stuff that you can control and think about ways you might be able to regress it so that maybe it's a smaller range of motion, or you bend the knee so it's less effectively heavy so that those muscles can work, and then gradually work yourself into the harder version of the exercise, and then keep working it harder and harder with more resistance as you feel comfortable and as you feel capable. You can even play around with angles. You might find being a little bit out to the side makes it a little more tolerable, maybe a little more in the center. Whatever is working for your body is what you need to work on, and then you just adjust, try to expand, explore, identify where you're weak, and as you build strength in those weak areas, you're gonna feel more stable. PAO surgery, cutting the whole pelvis and then reorienting a giant chunk of the pelvis, does in fact create more stability. It creates a situation where you lose range of motion because that does, by definition, make you more stable. However, the failure rate over a 30-year period is kind of shocking, and the number of patients who report that their pain was permanently removed is vanishingly small, as you'll see in the research articles that I have linked in the description box. So I do encourage you to go check out that article where I compiled all the research that is relevant to you if you have hip dysplasia. Now let's get back to the interview.
We continued to add on, add weights just to like truly strengthen. And gosh, I wish I remember the date, but I know I sent you a message on like a weekend and I said, Matt, I want you to know, like I jumped on the trampoline with my nephew.
I think I remember getting that too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I cried because I was like, how are we here? Like, how did this happen? And of course, I know, like, you worked so hard with me and I worked so hard doing it all, but it didn't feel possible when we had started. And I think that must have been, it had to be maybe month 4 because I pushed it and I stayed with you about, I pushed it because I didn't want to let you go and I really wanted to have you like helping me, but I was better. And I knew the exercises and they're not even hard exercises. They're just like mobility exercises I think we all should be doing. There's nothing crazy.
I think for you especially, I think context is for you, the idea of lifting weights and doing like any kind of real strengthening of your muscles was a little bit like, I don't think I want to do that.
I was doing like trendy workouts.
So just by adding a little bit in to give you some strength, that seemed to be enough to help your body feel right.
Yes.
So for women, it's generally women who are very, very flexible. Having muscles that are weak can really make things not feel good. Like you're just too hypermobile and you need to build strength.
Right.
So as part of this process, I wonder, do you remember anything in terms of setbacks in those first few months or any low points? Because I really don't like giving people the impression that it's always like, linear when we're great.
I think it's, you know what, it was hard work in the sense of working full time and finding the time to do it, right? It was also a weird year. It was like the pandemic. Things were strange at that time. But I was working a very demanding job. We used to talk about that. I probably worked 12, 14-hour days sitting at a desk all day, didn't take lunch breaks. It was a crazy time. So finding the time to actually do the physical therapy, do the work, it was tough. And there were days where I may have missed it. And then I think it was mentally exhausting because I would be upset with myself for missing a day and I wanted so badly to get better. It wasn't just an easy fix but I really did put in the work. And I think you have to put in the work. It's not going to happen if you don't. But you know what? You had a little pep talk with me in the beginning and you said, like, this is Zoom. Like, you have to do it. It won't work unless you do it. And so it wasn't easy. And I think I just get so excited saying, like, it worked, it's great, it's amazing. If anybody has any problems, come to Upright. But you have to do it. It wasn't easy every day. Tired. If I didn't do it in the middle of the day during my lunch, I would do it after work, even if that was like 8 o'clock at night. And that's not always fun, but
it's doable if it's a priority.
Yes. And sometimes actually, I asked you to put arm workouts in there for me. That didn't always happen because that wasn't always the priority, right? That was like, if I'm in the mood, it's the weekend, I have some time. I made the priority doing the stuff that was centered around the healing of where the actual injury was.
Right. So you were able to jump on the trampoline.
Yes.
Things were fabulous. I was very consistent about trying to get you to fly free. Like, that's something that's very important to me, is that people don't feel like, oh, they always need me,
Right.
because it's just not true. So eventually you're flying on your own, and you were doing fine for a while. What happened? What is it, maybe 2 years down the line? You
God.
reached out, maybe 2 or 3 years
Yeah.
later you reached out?
Yeah, 2 to 3 years later, I was good for a long time. And I had a separate injury, totally unrelated. I actually fell right there right down those little steps right there.
Okay.
I slipped and I fell. And I had a really bad bruise on my right glute. Didn't think much of it. I have a knot there. It's some scar tissue that's there because the fall was so bad. I now have some scar tissue that was there. And it wasn't until maybe 6 months to a year after that fall that I really realized the scar tissue buildup. And sometimes it would, I don't know if it was hitting a sciatic nerve or what exactly was happening, but it was causing some pain there. And then was affecting my walking. And mind you, everything with my hip had also been on the right side.
Okay.
So I kind of reached out to you regarding that because it was also giving me some knee pain. It was almost just like my right side was kind of, I don't want to say falling apart, but things weren't working so well on the right side again. Yeah. And I was trying to go for walks. And so I sent you a video just explaining to you everything that had happened, what was going on. And first things first is I was wearing the wrong shoes. So you told me like what kind of shoes to get would be better for my walks. And I really went back to basics and I restarted the program. Like from our old program, day one, exercises that strengthen the glute, the quads, everything. And I mean, within a few weeks, I was better again. But it was bad. Like there was a moment I was actually on a work trip and I had to drag my right leg because I couldn't lift it because the pain was radiating from my glute all the way down to my knee, which is really interesting to show that even doing some of these exercises, how much it helped my hip, but it could also help when the pain was coming from somewhere else. It was coming from my glute.
Well, so I think it's so important. There's a couple things to highlight. Is like, one, you're not going to be invincible, right? And two is, when you have something happen, you may be predisposed to something hurting because you haven't been maintaining strength, because you haven't been maintaining the activity level that keeps the muscles working.
Right.
And I think you pretty much discovered that, right? It's not happening from the first muscle that messed you up, but this other one is now paralyzed and now everybody is just not playing.
Everyone's not happy. Yeah. And I think it was neglected because I think I wasn't doing the exercises that we had been working on, and not even that, like I wasn't building upon them, right? Like,
right. Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
I took a little break. I was feeling good, and then, but it's a reminder of just I started over again, and
yeah, I think it's important to know like that's like a very normal phenomenon. When we get pain, we're now very motivated to do something and to stop it.
Yeah.
And so the question is like, what's the smart long-term way to stop this pain? And so for you, it was when it first started, you're looking at, well, what's the surgeon say? Holy cow, that's not a good long-term option. That sounds terrible. What are my other options? And then, mentally for you, it's like, well, who can save me? And then let me just stick to that person who can save me. But it can't be somebody else, right? You did all the work. And then when you stop doing the work, things will fall apart. But when you do the work again, you have your whole life back. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So I guess when you're looking at all this, do you have any words of advice or specific kinds of words of encouragement for somebody who's maybe facing the same situation, somebody who's been given the hip dysplasia diagnosis, who has hip pain? What can you say to that person out there?
Yeah. I think putting myself back when it was like such a low point, it's even hard to go back there, right? Because I've progressed so much. It's so scary. It's so scary when you don't feel well. And it can be overwhelming, and it's hard to know who to trust and really what to do, especially when you're in pain all day, every day. And I think like if something doesn't feel right, So if you go to a doctor and they're recommending a surgery and it doesn't, if something feels off the way it did with me, I think you just have to listen to your gut. You have to, or I would recommend knowing you do know what's best for you, right? You know your body, you know that there's so many resources out there, and you have to like do the research yourself before you just say yes to something that could be so life-changing and you can't go back on, right? I remember being in that moment, and the lows feel so low, and it's hard to see like a light at the end of the tunnel when you're in so much pain, especially when you're given a diagnosis like me where there's not really a solution except for surgery. And I think for me, I had this gut instinct that told me, no, that was not right, or it wasn't right at that moment. It's not something I felt like I needed. And if that's the feeling you have, it's okay to listen to that feeling. It's okay to do some research to figure out if there's anything else that could benefit your body. So if you're going to do any type of exercising, strength training, alternatives that could help your injury, I think go for it. And I think it's tough because a lot of people may not understand it. And I think they didn't in my case. It's like, what exactly are you doing? Is that the right way? But you'll know what's right for your body, and pretty quickly you'll see that your body's going to thank you. And surgery will always be there. It's not going anywhere. It's down the line if you feel like that might be there. But I think finding something the way I found you was so, so beneficial. And so if I could recommend somebody just putting into a little work into it that way, I highly recommend it.
Thank you so much for putting it that way, and I'm glad that you have the gratitude for what we normally call negative experiences. Yeah. But like you said, we learn so much from the setbacks, and then that makes us better. So is there anything else you'd like to add? Any words you think we need to add to your story?
Not to my story, but I just want you to know how grateful I am to you and your team and everything you do. I think your work is amazing, and I'm lucky to have you. I tell everybody, anyone who's come across you and your work, I think I could speak on everybody that we're very grateful.
So one other question I have for you is, what did you do with the cane?
I still have it. Memories. It's in my pantry.
It's in your pantry? It's
in my pantry. But you know what? It's a funny story. It belonged to my grandpa, and I borrowed it.
Oh.
And then now, we have it, but no one's had to use it. So I walked around that kitchen cooking Thanksgiving dinner with that cane.
It makes sense that you kept it, and hopefully you'll never need to use it again.
It's just a distant memory at this point.
I hope you found this discussion with Erica helpful, educational, and inspiring, and I hope it helps you feel confident in your decision to avoid sawing off a giant portion of your pelvis to supposedly fix your hip pain. I want to remind you that in the description box, I've got a whole article about hip dysplasia where I go into the research on the actual surgery and the claims that surgeons make, so you can use that to do your own research and understand the real risk factors involved with literally sawing your entire pelvis to try to fix a little bit of muscular hip pain. If you are looking for a way to fix your hips at home, I encourage you to first go to that article. I've got some exercise recommendations and resources there, and you can also check out the Healthy Hips program, which will help you strengthen the muscles around the hip and make them feel more balanced, capable, and confident so that you don't feel so unstable. Remember that your hip sockets are not more shallow than your shoulder sockets. Your shoulder sockets are super shallow, and your shoulders don't just dislocate all the time because you have muscles that keep them where they're supposed to be, and that allows you to do things like push-ups or handstands or whatever. If you can deal with the muscles, you can deal with a whole lot and make a whole lot of improvement. So be sure to check out the resources down below. I'd like to know what you found most inspiring in this story and what you learned. Drop me a comment down below. And if you want more videos like this, make sure you subscribe, share this, hit the like button. And as always, I hope you remember that pain sucks, life shouldn't.